Vivian Vance navigated the bustling corridors of Vance Technologies with a quiet, almost understated grace. At 42, she was a self-made titan in the fiercely competitive world of artificial intelligence, her company a gleaming testament to her vision and relentless drive. Yet, unlike many CEOs whose success manifested in ostentatious displays of wealth, Vivian embodied a grounded humility. Her office, sprawling and filled with natural light, contained no flashy art or designer furniture. Instead, it was lined with whiteboards covered in complex algorithms and a comfortable, well-worn armchair, where she often read technical papers. Every morning, she arrived before most, her practical yet elegant clothes a quiet statement of purpose. She greeted the janitorial staff by name, remembered birthdays of junior developers, and often, to the astonishment of new hires, would immerse herself in lines of code, debugging alongside her team, her brow furrowed in intense concentration. Her success, measured in billions, had only deepened her commitment to the principles of meritocracy and compassion, values forged in the crucible of her own modest upbringing in a working-class neighborhood. One crisp Thursday afternoon, Vivian's assistant, Maria, buzzed her intercom. "Vivian, your STEM mentees are here. They're excited." Vivian smiled, a genuine warmth spreading across her face. "Send them in, Maria, and hold all calls for the next 2 hours." For Vivian, mentoring young, underprivileged students in STEM wasn't a philanthropic duty. It was a passion. 3 bright-eyed teenagers, 2 girls and a boy, hesitantly entered, clutching worn notebooks. Vivian immediately put them at ease, pulling up chairs around a large conference table, not behind her imposing desk. For the next 2 hours, she was not a CEO but a patient, enthusiastic teacher. She walked them through complex coding problems, her explanations clear and engaging. She shared stories of her own early struggles, of late nights spent learning, of failures that taught her more than successes. She personally funded scholarships for those who showed promise, ensuring that financial barriers would not impede their talent. "Talent is everywhere," she often told them, "but opportunity isn't. Our job is to bridge that gap." This deep commitment to uplifting others, regardless of their background, showcasing her belief in raw talent and equal opportunity, was Vivian's profound save the cat moment. It demonstrated her integrity and underscored her unwavering dedication to creating a more equitable world. Despite her outward poise and formidable achievements, a subtle shadow sometimes flickered in Vivian's eyes, a ghost of a past struggle that fueled her unwavering strength. It was a memory she rarely spoke of, a raw wound from early in her career that had shaped her more than any triumph. A decade ago, fresh out of her master's program, Vivian had landed a coveted position at a burgeoning tech startup. She was brilliant, driven, and brimming with ideas. Yet, she found herself constantly underestimated, subtly sidelined, her contributions often dismissed or attributed to male colleagues. The environment was subtly hostile, riddled with microaggressions and unspoken biases. She remembered pitching a groundbreaking algorithm to a senior executive, a man who had praised her work privately, only to see him present it as his own at a company-wide meeting a week later, barely acknowledging her contribution. When she confronted him, she was met with dismissive laughter and thinly veiled threats about her attitude. The final blow came when she was abruptly fired, ostensibly for not being a team player. But in reality, she knew, for challenging the established order and for being a young black woman who dared to be smarter and more vocal than her male counterparts. The injustice had been a searing betrayal, not just of her talent, but of her very dignity. She had walked out of that office building, the weight of the unfair dismissal crushing her, a quiet fury simmering beneath her composure. It was a moment that could have broken her, forcing her back into obscurity. Instead, it ignited a fierce, unyielding determination. She vowed then that she would never again allow herself, or anyone else within her sphere of influence, to be dismissed, underestimated, or denied opportunity due to prejudice. This subtle hint about a past betrayal, a raw experience with racial bias and unfair dismissal, served as the planting of a seed of mystery. It explained her exceptional resilience, her quiet determination, and her deep-seated aversion to injustice, subtly weaving the personal into the professional and setting the stage for future confrontations where these principles would be tested. It was the quiet crucible that forged the steel in her soul. The hum of the office on a Tuesday morning was usually a symphony of productivity for Vivian, a comforting backdrop to her strategic thinking. Today, however, a subtle discord played beneath the surface of her calm composure. She needed to execute a high-value transfer, a crucial $50 million transaction, to secure the final patent for Synapse, her company's groundbreaking AI platform. Synapse wasn't just another piece of software. It was a revolutionary neural network designed to accelerate medical diagnostics by analyzing complex data sets with unprecedented speed and accuracy. It had the potential to transform healthcare globally, making early disease detection accessible and affordable. This wasn't merely a business deal. It was the culmination of years of tireless work, a deeply personal mission driven by her belief in technology's power to do good. The patent finalization required an in-person transfer at the bank, due to its immense value and the proprietary nature of the technology it protected. The deadline was tight, by the end of the business day, or the patent could be lost, jeopardizing Synapse and years of dedication. This was a make-or-break moment, a direct link between her personal mission and a public challenge that held the future of her company and potentially millions of lives in the balance. Vivian, armed with the necessary legal documents and her usual calm confidence, stepped into the gleaming lobby of the First National Bank branch. The marble floors gleamed, reflecting the soft overhead lights, and the air was cool, almost sterile. Yet, as she moved towards the teller lines, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in the atmosphere pricked at her senses. It wasn't overt, not yet, but it was there. The usually welcoming smiles of the greeters seemed a fraction too tight, their gazes sliding past hers. The tellers behind the polished counters seemed unusually busy, their heads bent over keyboards, avoiding eye contact. She initially dismissed it, attributing it to a particularly hectic Tuesday morning, a minor inconvenience in her packed schedule. Perhaps they were short-staffed or dealing with a system glitch. A flicker of unease, however, a familiar, unwelcome shadow from her past, began to stir within her, a faint echo of that subtle bias she had encountered years ago. Vivian chose a line, patiently waiting her turn, her mind already running through the final details of the Synapse patent. When she reached the front, the teller, a young woman with a neatly tied ponytail and an overly bright smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, seemed to deliberately avoid her gaze. She looked past Vivian, then at the clock above the counter, then at the next customer in line, her body language dismissive and evasive. This subtle but unmistakable act of disrespect was the point of no return. It solidified Vivian's growing unease, confirming that something was indeed wrong and that she could not simply ignore it. The flicker of unease intensified into a cold, hard knot in her stomach. Her calm confidence began to give way to a steely resolve. This wasn't just a bad day for the bank staff. This was personal, and she knew, with a chilling certainty, that she would have to address it. Vivian cleared her throat. "Good morning," she began, her voice calm, measured. "I need to make a wire transfer." The teller, without looking up, waved a dismissive hand towards the back of the bank. "Customer service desk for transfers. Next in line, please." Her tone was curt, her eyes still fixed on her keyboard. Vivian felt a slow burn begin in her chest. She had specifically waited in the teller line for a simple wire transfer, which was perfectly within a teller's purview for most transactions. The customer service desk was typically for complex account inquiries or loan applications. "No, this is a wire transfer, a large one," Vivian clarified, her voice firming slightly. "I'm sure you can assist me." The teller finally looked up, her overly bright smile hardening into something cold and impatient. Her eyes, briefly meeting Vivian's, held a flash of something unpleasantly condescending before darting away. "Ma'am, I just told you. Large transfers go to the customer service desk. There's a line there." She gestured again, impatiently, towards a much longer line at the back of the bank, where several people were already waiting. This dismissal, coupled with the subtle yet unmistakable disdain in the teller's eyes, was a direct affront. Vivian knew with a certainty that resonated deep in her bones that this was not about protocol. This was about something else entirely. The familiar shadow of prejudice, the subtle sting of being dismissed and underestimated, flared anew. Her jaw tightened imperceptibly. She would not be ignored. She would not be deterred. She would not let this subtle act of discrimination jeopardize her mission, her company, or the groundbreaking technology that could save lives. Vivian's gaze, steady and unwavering, met the teller's dismissive stare. The young woman, named Jessica by her name tag, seemed to brace herself, a subtle defiance in her posture. "Ma'am, I've explained the policy. Large transfers. And I'm telling you," Vivian interrupted, her voice still calm but with an underlying steel that cut through the teller's practiced indifference. "I need to make this transfer now, and I prefer to do it at this counter. It's a significant amount, but it's a standard wire transfer. There's no reason it can't be handled here." Vivian, ever composed, maintained her professional demeanor. She didn't raise her voice, didn't create a scene. She simply stood her ground, her quiet persistence a formidable force against Jessica's passive aggression. Jessica's eyes flickered nervously towards the glass-enclosed office of the branch manager, Mr. Harrison, then back to Vivian. A subtle shift occurred in her expression, a newfound boldness, almost as if she'd received an unspoken cue. "Look, lady," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, laced with an unpleasant edge. "We have procedures. We can't just process anything, especially from just anyone. Go to the customer service desk or come back another day." Her tone implied that Vivian was not just an inconvenience, but perhaps not a legitimate customer worthy of attention. Her thinly veiled prejudice was now palpable. This dismissive attitude, coupled with the subtle yet unmistakable disdain in the teller's eyes, was a direct affront. Vivian knew, with a certainty that resonated deep in her bones, that this was not about protocol. Unbeknownst to Vivian, Mr. Harrison, the branch manager, a man in his late 50s with slicked-back gray hair and a perpetually condescending smirk, had been observing the entire interaction from his office. He had seen Vivian enter, her elegant yet unflashy attire doing little to impress his superficial judgment. He had already made his snap assessment, another walk-in customer, likely with a small, inconsequential query, perhaps even attempting a scam. His subtle smirk, often present when he felt he was exercising his perceived authority, widened slightly as he watched Jessica's dismissive demeanor. He nodded almost imperceptibly at Jessica, a subtle encouragement for her to maintain her stance, his eyes conveying a clear message: "Don't let her push you around." He prided himself on maintaining strict order in his branch, an order that, in his warped perception, often meant keeping certain individuals at arm's length. His past experiences, colored by his own biases, had solidified his belief that appearances were everything, and he often prejudged clients based on race or perceived social status. To him, Vivian was just another black woman trying to bypass the rules. This was the moment the antagonist, Type A, truly emerged, his silent approval fueling the direct act of prejudice. Other customers in the bustling lobby, waiting patiently in other lines, began to notice the prolonged standoff. A few exchanged uneasy glances, their discomfort palpable. They saw a well-dressed black woman being inexplicably brushed off by a young teller, seemingly without cause. A kindly elderly gentleman, observing from a nearby bench, frowned slightly, a flicker of disapproval in his eyes. He considered intervening but ultimately hesitated, accustomed to the general rule of not interfering in banking matters. The general disquiet among these selective witnesses amplified the tension, creating a silent audience to the unfolding injustice. With a sigh of feigned exasperation, Mr. Harrison finally rose from his desk. He strolled out of his office, his movements deliberate, his presence radiating an air of self-importance. He approached the counter, not to mediate, but to subtly reinforce Jessica's behavior, making a pointed display of authority. "Is there a problem here, Jessica?" Mr. Harrison asked, his voice smooth, but with an underlying tone of challenge. He avoided direct eye contact with Vivian, instead focusing his gaze pointedly on the papers on Jessica's counter, as if Vivian herself were invisible. "This lady is insisting on a wire transfer at my window, Mr. Harrison," Jessica replied, her voice now brimming with confident righteousness. "I've told her it needs to go through customer service." Mr. Harrison finally deigned to glance at Vivian, his eyes sweeping over her briefly, dismissing her before settling back on Jessica. "Indeed," he drawled, his tone dripping with condescension. "Large transactions, especially those requiring verification," he emphasized the word with an unpleasant sneer, "must follow proper protocol. We simply cannot be too careful these days, you understand. One must ensure all our clients are legitimate. He gestured vaguely towards Vivian with a dismissive hand, as if she were a minor annoyance to be dealt with, his words a thinly veiled implication of suspicion regarding her credentials or the source of her funds. His actions confirmed the systemic, prejudiced nature of the denial of service, subtly implicating the entire branch team. He looked back at Jessica, a subtle wink betraying his true intentions. Jessica is merely following proper procedure, ma'am. I suggest you comply, or we'll have to ask you to leave. Vivian felt a cold fury, calm and precise, begin to churn within her. The familiar sting of prejudice, the insinuation that she was not legitimate, was a direct insult, a flashback to old wounds. Her past experiences had taught her that calm dignity was her most potent weapon. She knew, with a terrifying certainty, that this was not just about a wire transfer. It was about respect, about systemic bias, and about proving her worth in a world still quick to judge based on superficiality. Her jaw tightened, her eyes narrowing imperceptibly. The patent deadline loomed, a stark reminder of the stakes. She would not be dismissed. She would not be intimidated. And she certainly would not be told to come back another day. The confrontation had begun, and Vivian Vance, the quiet force of nature, was ready. The First National Bank lobby, usually a place of hushed transactions and discreet professionalism, now felt like an arena. The polished marble floors and gleaming brass fixtures, typically symbols of trust and stability, seemed to amplify the tension that crackled around Vivian. It was a bustling Monday afternoon, and the lines at the other counters stretched long, each customer a silent witness to the unfolding drama at Jessica's station. The low hum of whispered conversations and the rustle of papers created a dissonant soundtrack to Mr. Harrison's thinly veiled condescension. This public space, where dignity and service should have been paramount, had become the symbolic Jiao Truong for Vivian's quiet battle against prejudice. Mr. Harrison, puffed up with a false sense of authority, continued to address Jessica, pointedly ignoring Vivian. Some individuals, he articulated, his voice carrying just enough to be overheard by those in the vicinity, believe they are above bank policy. It's crucial, Jessica, that we maintain strict adherence to our procedures, especially for unusual transactions. It protects the bank, and it protects, well, everyone involved. His gaze flickered towards Vivian, a sardonic curl to his lips, making it clear that unusual and everyone involved were thinly veiled references to her. He subtly implied that her very presence, her very request, was somehow suspicious, a breach of their unspoken code. Vivian stood alone. Jessica, emboldened by Mr. Harrison's presence, had adopted an almost triumphant smirk, her eyes darting between Vivian and her manager. The other customers, though some exchanged sympathetic glances, remained firmly rooted in their places, their heads subtly averted. No one stepped forward. No one spoke up. They were bystanders, uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene, leaving Vivian to face the combined dismissiveness of the teller and the passive-aggressive authority of Mr. Harrison entirely by herself. This was the moment her hero's solitude was most acutely emphasized, forcing her to rely solely on her own strength and resolve. A quick glance at the stately bank clock above the main entrance confirmed Vivian's rising anxiety. The large hands pointed ominously towards 4:30 p.m. The bank's closing time was 5 p.m., a mere 30 minutes away. And more critically, the deadline for the Synapse patent transfer was rapidly approaching, set for 6 p.m. EST. If this transaction wasn't completed, the patent could be contested, jeopardizing years of work, billions in investment, and the revolutionary medical benefits of her AI platform. Mr. Harrison, seemingly aware of the dwindling time, took a perverse pleasure in pointing it out. "Now, ma'am," he began, finally deigning to address Vivian directly, though his tone was laced with an almost saccharine condescension. "I understand you might be in a hurry, but these matters take time. With only 30 minutes until closing, and given the complexities of your request, I highly doubt we can process anything for you today. Perhaps you could return tomorrow morning, with all your documentation in order, when we have more time to properly assist you." His words were a clear dismissal, a polite but firm attempt to eject her from the bank without processing her transaction. He emphasized complexities with a subtle nod towards her, implying her race or perceived social status was the actual complexity. Vivian felt the full weight of the time pressure. The urgency of the patent deadline, coupled with Mr. Harrison's deliberate delay tactics, created a tangible sense of desperation. Her heart pounded a rapid rhythm against her ribs, but her outward demeanor remained unruffled. She met Mr. Harrison's condescending gaze with an unyielding intensity. She knew he was trying to provoke her, to make her lose her composure, to give him a reason to dismiss her outright. He wanted her to storm out in a fit of frustration, validating his prejudice. But Vivian Vance had faced far greater challenges than a prejudiced bank manager. She had built an empire from nothing, overcome systemic barriers, and battled against far more insidious forms of discrimination. A quiet, steely resolve hardened her expression. She would not be intimidated. She would not allow prejudice to derail her mission. The future of Synapse, the millions of lives it could touch, depended on her unwavering resolve. The ticking clock and Mr. Harrison's smug dismissiveness only fueled her determination. She took a deep, almost imperceptible breath, preparing for the decisive confrontation. The gauntlet had been thrown. Vivian was ready to pick it up. The air in the First National Bank lobby thickened with unspoken tension. Mr. Harrison, his lips curled in a self-satisfied smirk, tapped his watch pointedly. "As I was saying, ma'am, with only a few minutes until closing, and without the proper documentation for such a complex transaction, I simply cannot authorize this. Perhaps another day, when you are better prepared." His voice was a silken dismissal, designed to humiliate and send Vivian away empty-handed, just as the crucial patent deadline loomed. Jessica, the teller, watched with a triumphant glint in her eyes, a silent co-conspirator in her manager's blatant prejudice. Vivian, however, remained outwardly calm, her composure a stark contrast to the swirling indignation within her. She met Mr. Harrison's gaze, her eyes unwavering. She could feel the stares of the other customers, the silent judgment, the subtle discomfort. This was the moment. She would not allow them to prevail. With deliberate, measured movements, she reached into her elegant, unassuming handbag. Her fingers brushed past her wallet, a small notepad, a pen. Then, with precise intent, she extracted a single, unostentatious business card. She placed it on the polished counter between herself and Mr. Harrison. It was thick, cream-colored stock, simple in its design, with only her name and title. Her finger tapped it once, a soft, resonant sound that somehow cut through the ambient bank noise. "I believe this," Vivian stated, her voice quiet but imbued with an undeniable, unshakable authority. "Is all the verification you need, Mr. Harrison?" Mr. Harrison's smirk remained fixed as he glanced down at the card. He expected a common business card, perhaps from a small local company, something he could easily dismiss. His eyes, full of condescension, skimmed over the name, Vivian Vance. Then they dropped to the title beneath, and that's when his entire demeanor shattered. His eyes widened, rapidly scanning the card again, as if disbelieving what he saw. The color drained from his face, leaving him a ghastly pale. The smirk vanished, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated terror. The card read, in elegant, understated script, "Vivian Vance, CEO, First National Bank Holdings." For a split second, an eternity seemed to stretch in the hushed bank lobby. Mr. Harrison froze, utterly paralyzed, his mind racing through the impossible implications. The woman he had just publicly humiliated, accused of being unusual and questioned as legitimate, was not just a customer. She was his ultimate superior. She owned the bank. He had denied service, based on prejudice, to the very person who held his entire career in her hands. This was the Kuan Kachnintho, the moment where all hope for the antagonists vanished, replaced by the chilling certainty of their impending downfall. Jessica, catching a glimpse of the card over her manager's shoulder, gasped, her face paling just as rapidly as his, her triumphant smirk twisting into a mask of pure horror. Vivian watched Mr. Harrison's face meticulously, observing every nuance of his shock and dawning terror. Her expression remained impassive, betraying none of the simmering fury she felt, yet her eyes held a cold, unwavering resolve. She picked up the business card, turning it over deliberately in her fingers, then placed it back down with a definitive click. Her voice, though still calm, now resonated with an iron authority that commanded absolute silence. Every word landed with the weight of undisputed power. "Mr. Harrison," Vivian began, her gaze sweeping from the petrified manager to the white-faced Jessica, then subtly encompassing the entire branch staff who had been privy to the exchange. "You and this entire branch team are fired, effective immediately." A collective gasp rippled through the crowded lobby. Customers who had been watching with growing discomfort, initially exchanging uneasy glances, now erupted in murmurs of stunned shock, quickly followed by a ripple of quiet, appreciative nods. A few even offered muted cheers, their faces reflecting a mixture of disbelief and satisfaction. The elderly gentleman from earlier, who had quietly observed, now gave a slow, deliberate nod of approval, a faint smile touching his lips. "Your prejudice," Vivian continued, her voice clear and cutting, "has not only cost you your jobs, but it has violated the very principles this institution stands for. This bank is built on integrity, on trust, and on equitable service for all its clients, regardless of their background or how they may be perceived. It will not tolerate bias. Not on my watch." Mr. Harrison, utterly deflated, stood rooted to the spot, his face a mask of abject humiliation and terror. The power he had wielded just moments ago had utterly evaporated. Jessica, trembling behind the counter, looked like she might faint. The stunned silence of the branch was broken only by the rapid, almost panicked murmurs of the customers. This public declaration, delivered with such quiet power and swift consequence, was a profound social vindication for Vivian. It wasn't just a personal triumph. It was a clear, undeniable statement against systemic bias, witnessed and acknowledged by everyone present. Vivian Vance, the underestimated CEO, had delivered justice, and in doing so, had reclaimed her dignity and asserted her absolute authority. The aftermath of Vivian's decisive declaration hung heavy in the air, a mixture of stunned silence and dawning realization. Mr. Harrison, a man utterly stripped of his pretense and power, stood frozen for a moment, his face a roadmap of disbelief, humiliation, and burgeoning fear. The realization that his career, his carefully constructed world of petty authority, had just imploded, was palpable. As two security guards, alerted by a discreet signal from Vivian's personal security detail, who had been observing from a distance, calmly approached him, he stumbled backward, clutching at the counter for support. He was escorted out of the bank, not with a struggle, but with the defeated slump of a man whose ingrained prejudice had finally, irrevocably, cost him everything. The bank's employees watched in a mixture of shock and quiet relief. Jessica, the teller, stood rigid, her face ashen, the weight of her complicity crushing down on her. Her immediate termination followed, a swift and unyielding consequence that left no room for doubt about the new standard of conduct. The downfall of antagonist, Type A, Mr. Harrison, was complete and utterly deserved, a stark lesson in the immediate and severe repercussions of systemic prejudice. Jessica, the antagonist, Type B, faced the direct consequences of her actions, a chilling realization of the gravity of her dismissive behavior. Vivian, however, did not linger on the triumph. Her focus immediately shifted. With a quiet command, she instructed the remaining senior staff to close the branch temporarily, citing an unforeseen internal audit. Within hours, a team of her most trusted executives from Vance Technologies, including legal and HR specialists, arrived. Vivian initiated a full, comprehensive internal investigation into discriminatory practices across every single branch of First National Bank Holdings. This was not just about Mr. Harrison. It was about rooting out systemic bias at every level. Mandatory diversity and inclusion training was immediately implemented, not as a mere formality, but as an intensive, ongoing program designed to genuinely educate and change ingrained behaviors. Old policies were scrutinized. New hiring practices emphasizing merit and diversity were swiftly enacted, and a clear zero-tolerance policy for any form of prejudice was communicated throughout the entire institution. The branch, under Vivian's direct guidance, underwent a profound transformation. She personally oversaw the hiring of a new, progressive branch team, promoting deserving individuals from within who had long been overlooked, and bringing in fresh, unbiased talent from diverse backgrounds. The air in the lobby, once subtly stifling with unspoken prejudice, now hummed with genuine warmth and efficiency. This was the profound new opportunity that had emerged from the ashes of confrontation, the chance to not just fire a prejudiced team, but to reshape an entire institution. First National Bank, under Vivian Vance's unwavering leadership, began to shed its old biased image. It implemented sweeping reforms that prioritized equitable service, community engagement, and a truly inclusive environment, becoming a beacon of fair and accessible financial services. It quickly transformed into a model for the entire banking industry, recognized not just for its financial prowess, but for its ethical standards and its commitment to social justice. A week later, in the newly reopened, revitalized branch, Vivian had a quiet conversation with Ms. Eleanor Jenkins, a senior long-serving bank employee who had witnessed the confrontation with Mr. Harrison with a look of subtle disapproval on her face. Ms. Jenkins, a wise older black woman who had silently endured years of Mr. Harrison's subtle biases, had shown Vivian a brief, knowing glance during the confrontation. Now she sat across from Vivian in the manager's newly appointed office, a slight tremor in her hands. "Ms. Vance," Eleanor began, her voice soft, I just wanted to say thank you for what you did, for all of us." Vivian smiled gently. "Eleanor, please, call me Vivian. And there's no need to thank me. I did what was right, what had to be done." She then shared with Eleanor a condensed version of her own past, the seed of mystery now blooming into a shared understanding. "Years ago, I was where you were, dismissed, undervalued, denied opportunities because of exactly what you saw last week. It almost broke me. But it taught me a valuable lesson. True success isn't just about accumulating wealth. It's about building a world where no one else has to go through that. This bank, Eleanor, is now a testament to that belief. Every single client, regardless of their background, deserves respect. Every employee, regardless of their position, deserves to be treated with dignity. This institution is now built on integrity, on merit, and on a deep commitment to justice." Eleanor listened, tears welling in her eyes, a lifetime of suppressed slights and frustrations finally finding validation. "It means everything, Vivian," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Everything." Their quiet conversation was a moment of profound, shared understanding, a mutual acknowledgement of past pain and a collective hope for a more equitable future. It solidified Vivian's resolve and Eleanor's renewed faith in justice. The bank, under Vivian's unwavering hand, was not just rebuilt, it was fundamentally transformed, a true reflection of her vision for a just and inclusive world. 1 year later, the transformation of First National Bank was undeniable, a living testament to Vivian Vance's unyielding vision. The polished marble lobby, once an arena of quiet prejudice, now hummed with a vibrant, welcoming energy. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating a diverse array of employees and customers interacting with genuine warmth and respect. Vivian's tech company, Vance Technologies, had indeed revolutionized its industry with Synapse, the AI platform now deployed in hospitals globally, drastically improving diagnostic accuracy and saving countless lives. Yet, despite her soaring success and expanding empire, Vivian herself remained grounded, her integrity unwavering. She continued to arrive early at her tech campus, still engaging in intricate coding, still greeting every employee by name. Her greatest joy, however, stemmed not from financial triumphs, but from witnessing the profound positive change she had instigated within the banking sector. First National Bank, under Vivian's direct and meticulous guidance, had become a national leader in equitable banking. Its branches, once marred by subtle biases, were now celebrated for their diverse staff, their inclusive policies, and their deep engagement with underserved communities. New loan programs were designed to support minority-owned businesses. Financial literacy workshops were offered free of charge in low-income neighborhoods, and the bank's advertising campaigns proudly featured a mosaic of faces that truly reflected the nation's demographics. It was a complete paradigm shift, proving that profitability and social responsibility were not mutually exclusive, but deeply intertwined. Vivian's commitment to justice extended far beyond the confines of her corporate empire. She established the Vance Equity and Innovation Fund, a substantial philanthropic initiative dedicated to dismantling systemic barriers. This fund provided crucial venture capital to minority-owned startups, offering a lifeline to entrepreneurs who often faced insurmountable hurdles in securing traditional funding. It also funded comprehensive financial literacy programs in underserved communities, empowering individuals with the knowledge and tools to build generational wealth. Vivian became a powerful, sought-after voice on national and international stages. She regularly delivered impassioned speeches at universities, corporate conferences, and global summits, championing diversity, equity, and inclusion in both technology and finance. Her story, once a quiet personal struggle, became a beacon of hope, inspiring a new generation of leaders to build businesses with conscience and to fight for a more just world. She was no longer just a CEO, she was a revered figure for social justice in the corporate world, a living embodiment of the principle that true power lies in uplifting others. One sunny afternoon, Vivian walked into the main branch of First National Bank. As she approached the grand entrance, the automatic glass doors slid open effortlessly, a subtle symbol of the new transparency and accessibility she had instilled. Inside, the lobby hummed with polite, efficient activity. A diverse team of smiling employees, their faces a tapestry of backgrounds and experiences, greeted her warmly, their respect genuine and unreserved. She paused, observing the bustling scene. The young teller who had once dismissed her, Jessica, now worked diligently at a quiet support desk, her expression one of humility and earnest focus. After her immediate termination, Jessica had been given an opportunity for redemption, undergoing intensive mandatory retraining and embracing the bank's new ethos. She had learned from her mistake, not just about policy, but about empathy, and now looked at Vivian not with fear, but with genuine respect and gratitude for the chance to learn and grow. Vivian offered a subtle, knowing smile, a flicker of satisfaction in her eyes. The scene before her was bathed in warm, inviting light, reflecting the bank's renewed purpose and her unwavering commitment to a just and equitable world. This transformed branch, teeming with genuine human connection, was the perfect, vibrant image of her second spring. It was a future built not just on profit, but on profound purpose, a testament to her strategic foresight and an unshakable belief that even the most ingrained systems of prejudice could be dismantled and rebuilt, creating a legacy of opportunity and dignity for all. Her life, once defined by the struggle against unseen bias, now shone as a guiding light, proving that justice, when pursued with unwavering resolve, always finds its triumphant dawn. If this story stirred your heart, if it reminds you that courage can alter destinies and that light always finds a path even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss our upcoming narratives that delve into the profound human spirit and the power of unseen heroes. Thank you for joining the journey.